What is up, people? Van from the VaniverseGaming channel here, bringing you another video on Solasta, Crown of the Magister. Today's video, we're going to cover the different classes you can choose from in Solasta. We're going to go over kind of what the gimmick is for each class, why you may want to put one of these in your party, but we're not going to get into the subclasses in this video. It would be way too long to do that. So if you're interested in wanting to know about each individual subclass, I'm going to do a separate video for each class covering all their subclasses. So go ahead and click on subscribe, click the little bell thing, and then you'll be notified when I make a video on each of the classes and the subclasses for them. So today we're mainly going to stick to here are the 9 classes available. Here's kind of what they do, and then you can decide if you want to put one of these classes into your 4-character party that you have to create when you play Solasta, Crown of the Magister. Now that does not mean you have to create one of each class. I mean, you could have 4 of the same class if you'd like. This is just more of a suggestion and kind of a description of each class. So let's get started. Now, first you'll notice is the Barbarian and the Druid class are part of the Primal Calling DLC. So we're actually going to cover them last because you have to pay the $10 to download the DLC for those. The other 7 classes you can choose from of the 9 are available with the base game. So we're going to begin just with the Cleric here at the top. And we're going to kind of talk a little about a Cleric. Now, if you're familiar with 5th edition D&D, Clerics are pretty darn strong in all ways, shapes, or form. It's never a bad idea to choose a Cleric. They have very strong ability to wear armor. They can cast damage spells. They can cast heal spells. They can be a frontline tank. They can be your soul healer. I mean, they pretty much can fill the party in any role that you probably want them to fill in. Damage, tank, or even healing. Now, one of the benefits of picking a Cleric is they get their Divine Domain or their subclass right at level 1. So a lot of subclasses won't pick up their subclass until 3rd level, some at 2nd level, but you get it at level 1 with the Cleric. Couple things to know about the Cleric just kind of as a whole is they're proficient in Wisdom and Charisma saving throws. They can wear up to medium armor and use shields, so this makes them fairly tanky. And you could even maybe specialize in heavy armor if you want to take that as potentially a feat down the road. They can choose from a couple skills that are very important skills: history, insight, medicine, persuasion, and religion. You can cast all the Cleric spells on a list, so if you're not familiar with 5th edition D&D, Clerics have access to their entire spell list for whatever level they can cast, and every day when they take a long rest, they can choose between what spells they want. But they always have access to the entire list of spells. Whereas if you choose a wizard or a sorcerer or another spellcaster, whatever you choose when you level up is what you're stuck with. And so you can't switch back and forth. So that's one of the perks of a Cleric is you can always swap out your spells based on the encounter that you're about to face. They do have the ability to ritual cast, but they have to have the spells prepared. So for instance, Detect Magic is a ritual cast spell. As long as you have it prepared, you don't waste one of your precious spell slots by casting it. If you take 10 minutes, you can cast Detect Magic, and it doesn't go against the spell slots that you get to use each day for a long rest. Now, the one caveat is you have to have it as one of your memorized spells or your prepared spells. So there is a little conflict there that do you want to run around with spells just to be able to do the ritual? Because you could be using those spell slots and prepared spells for something different. So keep that in mind. The Divine Domain you choose will drastically change the type of Cleric that you're going to go into, which we'll cover in another video. You can specialize in healing, you can specialize in melee. Depending on which domain you decide will also change the type of Cleric you're going to play. And you also have the ability to scribe scrolls. Now, this is your basic starting equipment down here, but for the most part, if you're looking for a class that is all around a good class, they can kind of do everything or even be tanky, even be a ranged DPS or a healer. I mean, you can't go wrong with a Cleric. They fit so many facets. So the next one we're going to talk about is the Fighter. So the real gimmick of the Fighter is they're a very strong class as long as you can get a lot of short rests. Now, in 5th edition D&D, there's not a ton of time to take long rests, and very few times are you going to short rest as well. But in this game, because it's a game, you can short rest fairly often. And what's great is their main gimmick is they have an ability called Action Surge, which allows them to double whatever action they do. So as a fighter, you get maybe 1 attack at low levels. When you get to 5th level, you get 2. And as you go up, you get, multiple attacks. Well, if you Action Surge, your 2 attacks become, 4 attacks. And so it makes it where if they really want to take somebody out, especially higher up in the game, and they can get, 3, 4, 5, 6 attacks, depending if they're hasted, it just makes it where they're pretty amazing to have if you really need to take something out very quickly. And since this game allows you to short rest, you get to Action Surge on every short rest, so you can just constantly short rest and get your action surge back. So other than that, they focus mainly on strength and constitution for their saving throws. They can wear every armor in the game and shields. They also are proficient in every weapon in the game. They have the ability to smith basic tools, so arrows and bolts, so you get a smithing kit. You also, with a fighter, you get a special ability called Second Wind. So this allows you to heal again on a short rest. And so if you can get short rest, you get a free heal that's 1d10 plus your level as a bonus action, which is super huge for a fighter. If you need that little bit of health until your healer can, heal you full, it's just nice to have. And since you can get it on a short rest, it's fantastic. And then the other thing is they get to choose a fighting style. So similar to a cleric, by choosing your domain, the fighting style for a fighter helps you kind of go into what you want to be. If you want to go down the fighting style to be a sword and shield wielder and get a higher AC, you can go that route. If you want to wield a two-hander, you can get a fighting style that if you roll crappy damage, you can re-roll it. If you want to go a ranged fighter, which is absolutely okay, and you want to go for a heavy crossbow or a bow, then you can choose the archery fighting style to get a +2 to your attack when you're using your ranged attacks. So if you're looking for a character that can wear every armor in the game, every weapon in the game, can either be a melee or a ranged fighter and do a lot of damage and be able to get a lot of cool abilities back on a short rest, then a fighter is a good choice for you. They are mainly a combat. That's what they're going to do. So in a video game aspect, playing a fighter is fantastic, where if you're playing tabletop, they might be too vanilla for people because outside of combat, there's really not much going on. So the next one we're going to talk about is the Paladin. Now the Paladin is probably a perfect combination or blend of the Cleric and Fighter together. So similar to the Cleric, they get saving throws in Wisdom and Charisma. But similar to a fighter, they are proficient in all armor, heavy armor, shields. When it comes to their ability to use weapons, they are proficient in all weapons, similar to a fighter. So you get the melee prowess of a fighter with some of the divine spell casting of a cleric. They have the same things to choose from when it comes to their skills. It's mainly focused around athletics, intimidation, but also some religion. And they also have a couple nifty little abilities like Divine Sense, where they can sense undead, fiends, and celestials, which isn't a huge deal in this game. It's just kind of gimmicky. They do get a healing pool, so a lay on hands, where they can choose to heal people, and the amount of points is 5 per level. So if you have, 10 points available, you can choose to use your lay on hands and get a temporary here. So it's almost like the second wind from a fighter, but you can actually use it on other people as well as yourself. Instead of healing yourself, you can choose to neutralize poison. And then also you have the ability to cure diseases on people. And again, the poison and disease in this game, you really don't run into it where it's that big of a deal. There are some creatures that kind of hit you with negative. It's basically lowers your temporary hit points for a while, but other than that, I haven't really run anything where disease or poison is that big of a deal that picking a paladin was going to cause that much of a difference. Now, there are a lot of undead, and so that's why paladins and clerics would be pretty good in this, because as you progress through the paladin levels, you get some more abilities that help you to be more stronger against undead, which might be something you're interested in. So if you're looking for a fighter that doesn't do as much damage in one shot, but can consistently do some damage, but also has some utility with some heals, Paladin's probably a good choice for you. Now we'll move to the Ranger. So the Ranger is fairly similar in you can be a melee or a ranged combatant. Your saving throws are going to be on Dex or Strength or Dexterity, because that's kind of which way you can go. You can either be a Strength Ranger or a Dexterity Ranger. You can only wear up to medium armor, but you can wear a shield. You do have similar ability to craft arrows and bolts, and you can use every weapon in the game that is available. Now, as a ranger, you're going to be focused more on nature skills, so a lot of your skills you're proficient in will be much more in regards to, you know, being out in nature, perception, investigation, survival, stealth, etc. But one of the best gimmicks of a ranger class is you get to choose your favorite enemy. So, in my recommendation, you know, picking undead or picking just humanoid are both really good options to choose from. So in this particular case, you have Aberration Beast, Celestial Construct, Elemental. So I would highly recommend, there should be more options than that. Maybe I am wrong on which ones you can choose from. Hold on. So given these options, you can choose which one you want, and you can do a little bit of additional damage against that creature. And then same with Natural Explorer. When you're traveling in between the different maps in Solasta, depending on what type of region it is, it helps with like how you forage food for your party. So kind of nice to have, not a big deal. So that's really what you get with the Ranger, is they are pretty much either a bow ranger, dexterity build, or even a strength ranger and do more of a melee build. And they get some spells that are quite fun. It helps enhance their abilities. Very similar to a fighter, they also get a fighting style. A lot of the melee type characters, the ranger, the fighter, the paladin, they all get a fighting style. So it really helps to kind of choose what you want. Now I am playing a ranger in my latest playthrough, and I'll be honest, like she has the highest like pluses to hit. And so her ability to hit things is just phenomenal. And so she's just really nice to have. And then some of the extra damage you can stack on with some of her abilities, like Hunter's Mark and her ability to have nature's favorite enemy. It adds up. So I really do like a ranger in this game. Again, similar to 5th edition tabletop, maybe a lot of people think they're not as much of a damage dealer, they're not as good, but I seem to really enjoy the ranger because they can also take on kind of the role of the rogue. So if you don't want to play a rogue in Solasta and you have a Dex Ranger, you can pick a background that gives them proficiency in Thieves' Tools, and they can kind of take the place of your rogue, but also have kind of the melee damage and consistent damage of a fighter, so to speak. So something to keep in mind. So speaking of the rogue, let's talk about the rogue next. The rogue is very similar to a ranger on a dexterity build. They get saving throws in dexterity and intelligence. They can only wear light armor, and they can only use simple weapons minus long swords, rapiers, and short swords. With a rogue, you're always going to want to use a piercing weapon solely because your sneak attack is based off of using a piercing weapon, but it can be a range piercing weapon like a bow or a crossbow or something of the sort. Now, they're always proficient in Thieves' Tools. They also get proficiency in a lot of what you would think, you know, sleight of hand, stealth, even some acrobatics and some of the other things. They can do the same type of smithing where they can make basic ammo and bolts, etc. They get expertise, which allows them to double their proficiency in 2 skills. This is very nice for stealth because as long as you stay stealth, you're able to do your sneak attack damage in Solasta. So if you have proficiency in stealth and their perception, you continue to roll a very high stealth check, you can pretty much stay in stealth and do damage and never get out of stealth. Almost guarantee you sneak attacks every time. So in Solasta, rogues are pretty powerful instead of playing like on a tabletop 5th edition if you're used to doing that. And then obviously we talked about their sneak attack damage. It's 1d6 every 2 levels when they hit a creature and they're basically getting advantage on them. So there's lots of ways to get advantage, so where you're pretty much going to be getting your sneak attack. And that 1d6 every 2 levels actually adds up to where, you know, you can go to level 12 in this game. And so that's 66 at level 12 that you're getting in addition to your weapon damage when you hit something, which is nothing to sneeze at, for sure. And also, rogues are great to have for the ability to open lock chests and to, you know, detect traps and disarm traps. But you never know. There's always that one that you're never going to be able to open no matter how high you roll. So that's when you bring a wizard in and you just use the knock spell. So the Sorcerer is next on our list. For anyone who hasn't played 5th edition D&D, a Sorcerer is a spellcaster that is innate by nature, innate. So they pretty much are born with this magic in their body. So they do not have a lot of spells to choose from, but what they can do to their spells is what makes them special. So your saving throws are going to be in Constitution, Charisma. You can only use the very basic stuff that you would normally be able to use as a caster: darts, daggers, quarterstaff, crossbow. Your skills are in, you know, Arcane is a good one to have it in, Insight, that kind of thing. You get to cast 2 spells from the Sorcerer's spell list when you start, so whatever you choose is what you're stuck with. And then as you level up, you can keep choosing more. You have the ability to swap out spells as you level up. If you don't like it anymore, you can swap it out for another one. But for the most part, you don't have a lot to choose from. So what you want to be as a sorcerer is kind of what's going to define your spell choice, and that's going to kind of dictate how you play the sorcerer throughout the game. Now, you also are able on herbs and enchanted equipment, so you're able to enchant weapons and you're able to make potions. And then you have different origins that give you different abilities. So similar to the Cleric, the Sorcerer gets their subclass at level 1. I didn't say this, but some of these other ones get theirs at level. So this guy, he gets his at level 3. The Ranger gets theirs at level 3. So you can see level 3, level 3. Cleric's level 1, so if we click on the Sorcerer, it'll say level 1, and then Wizard, you'll see they get theirs at level 2. So ultimately, if you want to be a Sorcerer, you're going to be casting specific spells very often, but then the gimmick of a Sorcerer is the meta magic. So basically, you have the ability to take that spell and quicken it so that you can cast it as a bonus action, or to twin it. So a spell that supposedly targets one character, you can now twin it to target 2 characters. And so you can do some really cool stuff, or you run out of spell slots and you don't have time to do a short rest. You can then burn some of your sorcery points and get spell slots back. So that's what makes them kind of unique, is they're the only class in the game that can turn something like a fireball into a bonus action and still cast a cantrip. And then on their cantrip, they could twin it and hit 2 other creatures. So some really cool stuff there. And then our final class is going to be the Wizard. So traditionally, the Wizard and the Sorcerer are very similar. They're pretty much your only 2 arcane casters in this game. You do have a little bit of an arcane caster in like the Rogue. You can do a fighter that has some arcane. And then I believe there's a Cleric domain that's much more arcane-y in their spell casting. But for the most part, if you're going Wizard, you want to be a spellcaster. Now, they're very similar to Sorcerer in their saving throws. They're very similar to what they can use weapon-wise. Both the Sorcerer and the Wizard can't wear any armor. So a good choice is to pick a background that allows you to wear armor, because as long as you're proficient in it, you can wear it. There's no penalties. Like in the old versions of D&D, you could be a spellcaster, but if you wore heavy armor, you had like a negative on your rolls for trying to cast in armor. That's not how it works in 5th edition. So you have the ability to cast wizard spells. So they're kind of a hybrid between a Cleric and a Sorcerer, where you get to choose spells in the beginning of the game, similar to a Sorcerer. But then as you play the game, you have the ability to continue to add spells by copying them from a scroll into your spell book. So you can continue to grow how many spells you have in your spell book. You're not just stuck with the ones you get as you level up. But unlike the Cleric, you don't just get everything right out of the gate. The other great thing about a wizard is they're the only class that can ritual cast spells without having to memorize the spell. So in Solasta, the two spells you're going to use all the time are going to be Detect Magic and Identify. I will almost tell you having a wizard in your party is going to be a must if you want to save lots of gold on trying to identify and to detect magic on stuff. And the fact that you don't have to use it as a prepared spell, you can use it not prepared. It allows you to keep your spell slots for other spells and still be able to identify and still be able to detect magic, whereas a cleric, you can detect magic, but you'd have to use one of your precious memorized spells or prepared spells. So keep that in mind. And then, of course, because they're a wizard, they can obviously scribe scrolls and do enchantment on like different weapons and those types of things in crafting. So that kind of sums up the classes that come with the base game. So now we're going to get into the Barbarian and the Druid next. So Barbarian came out with the Primal DLC. And the gimmick of a Barbarian is you don't have the armor of a fighter or a Paladin, but you have a ton of hit points. And when you're raging, you reduce all damage that you take from non-magical means in half. So theoretically, if you have 80 hit points, you technically have 160 hit points if you're being attacked with melee weapons, because every time they hit you, you're cutting that damage in half. And so that's really the gimmick of a Barbarian, is they dish out a lot of damage, they can suck up a lot of damage, and they do it without having to wear armor. So obviously they're proficient in strength and constitution. They can use every weapon available in the game, but they can only wear medium armor and shields. They are, depending if you wear barbarian armor, then their armor is actually based on their armor class plus their dex plus their constitution. So if you roll dice and you continue doing the roll until you get a really high dex and constitution, if you had like a 20 dex and a 20 constitution, you could have a 20 armor class with a barbarian and never have to put any armor on. So keep that in mind. Their skills are very similar to a ranger, very much so survival, athletics, intimidation. And then, of course, we talked about it. For 1 minute, they can rage. And they usually get a couple rages depending on how they level up, how many times. And then you can only rage every long rest. But while you're raging, you get that resistance we talked about, and then you get an additional 2 points of damage on every melee attack. And so it adds up when you're doing an additional 2 points of damage every time you hit. And on top of that, you're cutting all the damage to you in half. So all in all, if you want to play a guy who just doesn't give a shit and he's just going to rage and run in there and take hits and be okay with that and dish out damage, they're a good class to play if you want that frontline fighter. Now, the other class we're going to finally cover is the Druid. I got to tell you, I'm biased on Druids. I think in Tabletop 5th Edition, Druids are fantastic, and in Solasta, Druids are fantastic. The reason why I like the Druid is not for the wild shape. I will tell you that wild shaping in Solasta is not great. It's actually quite terrible. So if you want to play a wild shape Druid, have at it, but you're just not going to get the same fun, I guess, or the same experience unless you choose like a Circle of Land Druid. It's going to get you much more mileage in Solasta versus a tabletop. So they have intelligence and wisdom proficiencies similar to a wizard. They can use a couple interesting weapons, but they have an affinity to non-metal. So anything that's metal they won't wear. So no metal shields, no metal armor. So you're pretty much stuck to a scimitar and a spear, quarterstaff, and then armor-wise, you're pretty much stuck to light armor, medium armor, and as long as it's not metal, you can wear that type of stuff and a shield. Now, they are similar to a cleric, and they get access to their entire spell list, so they can prepare whatever spells they want each day, and they can choose from the list provided. And they also can do ritual spells, but they also have to have them prepared like a cleric. So they function very similar to a cleric, but the gimmick of a druid class is the ability to shapeshift into a creature, which in Solasta is not the most fantastic thing. So technically, what makes the druid stand out is the spell choices that you get to choose from. And so, to me, if you had to choose between a Cleric and a Druid, both are fantastic, and we can kind of cover this in my next video when we talk about subclasses. But the Druid, some of the Druid spells are just stronger than some of the Cleric spells in just how it works in Solasta. And then you can even go down a Wizard path that kind of gives you Druid spells, and some of the Rangers have some Druid spells. So it's really up to preference on if your choice would be, do I want to play a Druid? Do I want to play a Cleric? Do I want to play a Ranger? Do I want to play a Wizard? Like, what am I trying to achieve? And does the Druid fit? But my experience is a specific land Druid checks all the boxes of a Ranger, Wizard, Cleric to make it the best choice of all of them. So, but we'll get into that a little bit later. So that's basically the different classes available in Solasta and kind of what makes each one special. If you've played 5th edition D&D, a lot of this is very common information. If you haven't, hopefully this helped you. And then if you stay tuned, we're going to get into the subclasses for each class, break them down, kind of explain what are the good subclasses, benefits, etc. And then eventually I want to make a video that's going to basically tell you what my favorite party is. To me, there's a party setup that I've liked. There's a couple options, 2 or 3 different ones, but there are just specific classes and subclasses that I would almost always recommend when you're playing Solasta, especially on some of the higher difficulties and on Iron Man mode if you want to go for it and not die. This is Van from the VaniverseGaming channel. Thanks for watching. Cheers and peace out.